see it on your page yet. I'm gonna share the feed myself.
We are live, fellas. We are live on YouTube and Facebook, should be. And thanks for tuning in. So, just a quick note for my subscribers. We this will be the last. Hold on. My audio started from
Oh,
YouTube started talking, but I was hearing my voice. But yeah, so we won't be streaming again probably till mid June because me and my co-host we're going to be out the country. So this will be the last episode for probably about a month. But yeah, so now that's debatable. Uh, Glad to have you back on, Wes.
yeah, man. Good to be back. It's been a minute. Good to pick up one of those conversations that we kind of left some loose ends on.
Yeah, man. Phantom he says, "Oh, the Spuffy theologian. He looks
Yeah,
spitting image of Wes. Yeah, he looks very much like Wes, doesn't he? Yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
man.
I was just gonna say back in the day, I adopted the moniker the Spiffy Guitar Man
Ah,
because
okay.
right around when you got AOL Instant Messenger and all that kind of stuff, that was my
Mhm.
screen name. And so since I've gotten into the apologetic space, I figured you and Facade have neat nicknames. I was like, let's go with Spiffy something. So Spiffy
Yeah.
Theologian,
Okay.
that works.
Nice. Awesome. So I wanted to bring you back on to discuss morality because we discussed this on a few episodes, and I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 episodes we discussed this, and on most of the times we talked about this. The episode wasn't about morality, but
Right.
there was some. I never feel like we had a whole conversation about it because there's so much that we disagree on values on objective, subjective, intrinsic, and like some of your objections are. And so, first, I'd like to start off. Do you remember what like my moral system, or should I go over it again? I can.
I mean, it's been a while. I think I have a basic grasp. I know one of
Mhm.
the fundamental differences that we had when we first when we first broke the seal on this conversation was an understanding of objective morality. Like we
Yeah.
were operating with two different distinctions there. I think generally speaking, you're a humanist, right? So you
Yes.
value human life, human well-being, and specifically consciousness. That's been something that comes up. So whereas humanity is certainly at the top of the list, it's not the only, shall we say, animal life form that's
No.
up there from your view. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, and I
Okay.
wouldn't even say animal. Like if like anything that's sentient. So if
Sentience, that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say AI eventually became sentient. Now, I think the moral imperatives will also apply to that. I would now be able to do immoral things to artificial intelligence. Like for instance, injecting malicious code into AI. If that was harming it, I would say that's immoral. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So
Okay.
like for I put humanity in the center of my value system. Not human, I'm sorry, sentience in the center of my value system.
Right.
And it is, I guess maybe it's the hang up between objective and subjective. It is subjectively defined as all words are, right? So
Mhm.
it takes a mind to define what I mean by morality. But once we define it, there are objective assessments that can be made in regard to it. So when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about essentially your experience. And only
Mhm.
sentient things can have experiences. And I think your experience can be broken down into these 5 prongs: your health, your wealth, your happiness, your security, and your freedom. And they're kind of related. Like I can harm one, for instance. Like when I say your wealth, to be more,
Can you repeat that list again?
yeah. So health, wealth, happiness, security, and freedom.
Freedom. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm. And when I say wealth, I'm not talking about being rich. I'm talking about access to resources, food, water, shelter, medicine, etc. That's what I mean by wealth. Just
Okay.
just like tangible possessions that help contribute to the other prongs. They help contribute to your health, to your security, to your
Okay.
freedom, to your happiness, etc. And
So not
so,
so not just money, but certainly not excluding money.
yes,
Okay.
it would include all those things. And so, that being said, so once we defined what morality is, now I can make objective assessments about it. For instance, like, yeah, I can say whacking you in the head with a sword, that would be objectively immoral because it's just an objective fact that it harms your well-being. So that, and
Okay.
you kind of shake your head.
I'm
Uh,
I'm 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 processing it. I think one of the things that I think out of the gate that is problematic from a non-theistic worldview, specifically biblical Christianity, is why these five prongs, right?
mhm.
And when you say, you know, obviously whacking you in the head with a sword would be immoral because it does damage to your well-being. Um, you could say that in one sense, but at the same time, why should those considerations matter? Like, what is it about that your standard that should apply? Say, if I were to whack somebody on the head with a sword,
Mhm.
according to your morality or your standard of morality, what's to keep me from doing it on a different outcome, even with the same fundamental uh, criteria?
And so that's when we get into values, because I would say there is nothing that's keeping you from doing anything.
Right.
Like, and my system is merely descriptive. It's not prescriptive. So when I say something's immoral, I'm not
That's
saying
helpful.
you ought not to do it. I'm just saying it's immoral. Period.
Gotcha.
Yeah, whether you ought to do it, that's going to be relative to your value. There are, in some instances, depending on what your value is, you ought to be immoral. Like, for instance, like I was a police officer. I'm still in the army. I signed up to do immoral things.
Hmm.
Right? I wouldn't say I'm a bad person. I would say, like, the things I did and still will do are justified, like, considering the context. But I would say it's just a fact. It will be a contradiction to say, like, let's say a police officer, there's a shooting in a school,
Hmm.
and I've never been in a situation, but let's say I had to run in and take out the police, take out the shooter, right?
Right.
I'm gonna have to kill him. That's immoral because I
Is it?
violated. Yes, it is. It
Hmm.
is it is objectively immoral.
This gets to a term that you've used that we've clashed over: justified immorality. Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so just justified immorality is actually going to have some subjectivity into it because it's based on it's based on your capabilities. It's based on your knowledge. Like, for instance, let's say if now let's say that guy, he's shooting up the school, right?
Hmm.
If I'm Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, I could snap my fingers,
Right.
and his gun's gonna turn to bubbles. I can stop the shooting without harming anyone.
Right.
Now, if I'm just me, I'm gonna have to run in there and do some kind of violence. I'm gonna have to kill him.
Hmm.
It's immoral because I'm violating his health, I'm violating his freedom, I'm violating all sorts of things. Right. So it's just objectively immoral, but considering the context, because there are limitations in my ability to contribute to well-being. For instance, I got to consider the health, wealth, and the well-being of everybody else that he's killing. So there's a limit in my ability to contribute to well-being.
And
This
that's assuming you have an accurate understanding of the health, wealth, happiness, security, and freedom of somebody else. Right.
No. So it is, so I mean, I could so the truth of the matter isn't contingent on my knowledge, but the justification might be.
Okay. Okay. So you could justify immoral actions so long as your understanding of its impact on somebody else's health, wealth, happiness, security, and freedom
Yeah,
is.
within like a reasonable degree. Like for instance, let's say like you're a cop, you're walking the beat,
Mhm.
and I point a gun at you. It's unloaded.
Right.
There's no ammunition in it. Your life is not in danger. You don't know that.
Correct.
You'd be justified in shooting me. Now, what shooting me is immoral because it violates my health, but it's justified. It's justified considering the context, right? Because of your
Mhm.
limitations in contributing to well-being. So, do you see what I'm saying? So, it's
Right.
subject. But let's say if you did know that the fact was definitely unloaded, and there's no way I could harm you. In that instance, shooting me would be unjustified,
Okay.
right? So that's what I'm saying. So like justifications vary based on the person's knowledge and based on the capabilities. Let's say I break into somebody's home and I'm in there that I'm going to try to fight them, right?
Hmm.
Maybe for you, shooting me may not be justified. Because it's two grown men, maybe like similar strength. If you're an 80-year-old woman, it might be.
Okay.
Right. So it's based on not only your knowledge, but also your capabilities and just the context in general. And that's the system in a nutshell. It is subjectively defined, but it can be objectively assessed. That's what I I call moral realism.
Moral realism. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. I That seems all fine and well until you get to what I would say is a necessary component of morality, and that's a prescriptive characteristic of it. Right.
Okay.
When, for example, you're raising your kids, you don't teach them merely about the health, wealth, happiness, security, freedom aspect. You connect it to behaviors you expect out of them, right?
Hmm.
Like, I expect you not to steal somebody from somebody because it takes away their resources. It minimizes their happiness. It might limit their freedom. Those kinds of things. But ultimately, there is a prescriptive component to that instruction, right?
I would separate that from morality. I would say that's part of your values. There's a difference between morality and
Hmm.
valuing morality.
Okay. Why would you not also state that health, wealth, happiness, security, and freedom are values as part of your moral system? Because it
So
seems like those
because
five make sense. I'm not arguing against
mhm.
those necessarily, but it does seem to be that you've picked five values as central components of a moral system, and now you want to distinguish between values and morality. You see what I mean?
So yeah, so I would consider those prongs. I would consider those standards, not values, because there is no obligation for you to care about them. You don't have to care about somebody's health. You don't have to care about somebody's wealth or etc. That's
Hmm.
why I say they're not values. I say they're standards. So like
Okay.
if I were to stab you, I am immoral. I don't have to care about being immoral. I don't have to care about your health. I don't have to care about them. That's why I say they're not
Okay.
values. It's just a standard.
Okay. So if your standard is violated, so what? Like, what's the consequence?
So as far as my moral system is concerned,
Hmm.
if my standard is violated, then that person is immoral. That's it.
Okay. So
No.
the transgression of this moral system that you've outlined,
Mhm.
the worst consequence if somebody else were to violate it is your negative view of them,
Well,
specifically
no.
that they're an immoral person, or
Well,
at least that they committed an immoral action.
even if there was no consequences, the act would still be immoral. Period.
On your view. But how do
Well,
you know that
but
your view
but
of morality is correct? Right? Because that's what gets closer to what I would say a traditional understanding of morality is, and that it's objective. Like the laws of logic, we
mhm.
didn't invent those, we didn't create those, we discovered those. Like physical laws, laws of gravity, speed of light, those kinds of things, we discovered them, and conforming our behavior to those, we find we work better in this universe, right? We don't jump off buildings because we know what gravity does to us,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So similarly, moral laws are something that exist outside of us that when we behave consistently with them, we find more pleasurable, more profitable outcomes for us as a species at bottom, right? And I would say, more wholly, more holistically rather, that when you align yourself with those behaviors, you are in fact a better person.
Yeah,
It,
I would say by how, and I would agree that if you do,
mhm.
if you value those things, I would say that you are a better person because I value those things. But now, actually, could you remind me of what your question was so I can properly address it?
It has to do with those five components
Hmm.
being themselves values. Like it seems to me, those are values you have imported or at least used to
Okay, gotcha.
establish your moral system.
So think about this. So like when I say, look, when we talk about a foot, and let's say that it's equal to this distance.
Hmm.
There's no reason to care about this particular
Sure.
distance. And if something isn't this distance, then it's not a foot. There's not an
Okay.
obligation for it to be a foot. But if it's not exactly this, then it just isn't a foot. That's really it.
Okay.
The consequences are separate. The consequences are going to be imposed by us because, like, if it's if the
Only
con
if we agree, right? If we
well,
disagree on moral standards, then we're going to disagree on moral outcomes too, right?
uh possibly, yeah. I mean, there's not going to be there's probably going to be some overlap, but like you and I disagree
Hmm.
on moral standards, but there's probably 99% of the things we're probably going to consider, like
Oh,
we're probably
sure.
going to agree on.
But for example, suppose I were to say, no, stealing's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with stealing, and you believe stealing is wrong, right? Because it reduces somebody's wealth, happiness, security, what have you.
Hmm.
We encounter each other and I go, well, I got a pretty good idea. He's not going to take back from me. Let me go ahead and snag this real quick.
So
Skedaddle,
now,
right?
okay, and this is going to sound like really trivial, but it's not,
Okay.
because with my moral system, I'm not saying you shouldn't steal. I'm saying stealing is
Yep.
immoral. That's it, and that's
But
where it ends.
it's not immoral across the board. It's
It-
immoral specifically to you.
By no, not to me. By the definition, the
Okay.
objective definition that I gave you. Like it is, and when you say to me, if you mean by it's subjectively defined, that's how all words, all terms are. Everything is subjectively defined. It needs a mind to define it.
Fair enough when it comes to words and terms, but we're talking about moral realism,
Yeah.
right? So presumably there's a component of morality that aligns with reality that's
Mhm.
beyond specifically you or me, and that's where I would come across and say that the objectivity of morality is not merely mind independent, because I don't think that makes sense practically, right? Because
Right.
anybody who's developing a moral system is going to use a mind, if nothing else, to define the moral
To
system, and then also use a mind to understand where that moral standard is transgressed.
so the is subjectively defined because it requires a mind,
Hmm.
and it's going to be assessed subjectively as well because that requires a
Okay,
mind. But its ontological status does not depend on a mind. Like whacking you in the
sure
head with
does.
why would it? Like it's not whacking you in the head with a sword is going to harm you. Like that's not a matter of opinion.
Harm according to who?
So when we're talking about like your health, right?
Hmm.
Okay, we can define your health in a bunch of different ways. We can talk about like your brain activity, your heart, and
Sure,
what is what contributes to the longevity and efficient operation of those things.
but why
We
is
could define,
longevity a consideration here?
well, that would be part of health, right? This like so obviously like so if I was to give you a pill that would shorten your lifespan, like if you were to like cigarettes or cocaine, that's going to shorten your
Sure.
lifespan. We're not going to call that healthy because that's right.
I mean,
Like,
that's fair. I can agree with you
mhm.
on the particulars, but when it comes to the standard, it seems almost self-referential. It's like it's almost reasoning in a circle to say that we should value health, and
Nope,
then
not and say
it,
that.
it, uh,
They say we should value health.
right, okay, but it's included in your top 5 for a reason.
You-
Why
big-
why is it included as part of the moral system?
so because remember, morality only applies to sentient things.
How do you know?
And well, because like I when we talk about like a rock can't have health or wealth, or the rock can't be happy,
Oh, okay, but how do
right?
you know?
Well, I mean, I have no reason to think a rock could if a rock if a rock could be happy, then I
Huh?
would say then the moral what do you want to call it, moral imperatives would apply to the rock.
Oh, the
But
moral
from
imperative, that sounds a lot like prescriptive.
no, it's just that's not an
Because an
obligation.
imperative
An
is
imperative.
specifically like uh, you go ahead. I'm going to look up that particular term because
Yeah.
I think
So the think about like an Aesop problem when Kant talk about categorical and hypothetical imperative.
mhm.
Like a categorical imperative, there's no obligation. It's just saying it this is that, right? If
Mhm.
if you die, you will cease to live, right? That's a categorical imperative. That's just the way it works.
Okay, so just real quick,
Mhm.
Merriam-Webster's defines imperative as a noun, something that is a command, an order, a rule, a guide, an obligatory act or duty,
And so when I'm
right?
using so when I'm using imperative, I'm talking think about like a categorical imperative.
Mhm.
Remember, Kant's categorical imperatives?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, those aren't obligatory. They're just descriptions. Like like you're doing a race, you're doing a 5K.
hmm
If you don't run, you will lose.
Okay.
There's no obligation there. It's just stating a fact. It's not saying you ought to run. It's not saying you ought to care about winning the race. It doesn't say any of that. It's just stating a fact, and that's how I'm using the word imperative here. It is
Okay.
merely descriptive.
With all due respect, I think the more accurate term would be indicative rather than imperative because you want it to be descriptive, not prescriptive. And I mean, grammatically speaking, an imperative by definition, or I mean, just by the word
A-
itself,
And but
means some sort of prescriptive action.
and so like in a colloquial use, sure. Like in philosophy, it can apply to both prescriptive and descriptive. Like just like with Kant's hypothetical and categorical imperatives. Like think
Well, yeah, but
like
even in those situations, though, like he's describing it as uh, at least a principle that must be followed despite ourselves,
no.
despite what. Yeah,
not
okay,
not not a categorical imperative, because what he's describing, he's distinguishing is from oughts. A
right.
categorical imperative is just an is.
I think you're fundamentally incorrect there, and that's one of the many disagreements that we've had. We can move past it if you want,
Okay,
but I
yeah, I
think
mean,
that's
I can yeah, I can use like whatever word you like. Oh, all I'm just describing is an is. And
okay.
so if the rock can experience those things, we would call that rock sentient. Like if it can experience happiness, experience freedom, I'm that rock is sentient.
Okay, but
But
that raises the question. I won't say begs the question, but it raises the question. How do you know it's those 5 that lead to sentience?
okay, so well, that's kind of like what I'm describing it. So when I say sentient, I'm
hmm
talking about something that can experience some
Okay.
like and when I mean experience, you're able to distinguish yourself from your environment. And just think about the things that are able to do that. Like for instance, a roach.
Okay.
A roach is sentient. How do we know? Because it's able to distinguish itself from environment. Try to kill a roach. It's going to run away from you. Right? It's
How
engaging
do you
in
know that's a conscious act on the cockroach?
well, it's engaging in self-defense.
Is it?
Yeah. It's running away from you.
Well, I mean,
It'll hiss at you.
yeah, that's not running away. That's more aggression,
Yeah.
right?
So
So I mean,
but so it sometimes
but that's my point. Like there's
so
various programmings that can happen
so
from
well
an atheistic worldview, like humanism, for example. There's no distinguishing metric, except I think this is where the circularity comes in, right? Because we've got these 5 that
Sure.
describe sentience, and I ask, well, how do you know? And you're like, well, something that sentience can experience. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to these 5 areas of experience, right?
Yes, because that describes the entire experience. So first with the roach, whether it's in fighting back or running away, it is distinguishing itself from the environment. That's the
I,
point that I'm making.
okay, I think
Because
that's a step too far based on the data that we have.
if
You can
if you
identify the behavior, but saying it's doing it as a way to or because it distinguishes itself from its environment,
bec-
how do you know? I
well,
think it's a legitimate question to ask how you know that.
try to hit an area that is not near the roach. Go across the street and slap a mailbox and see how the roach react, and then do it near the roach, and you'll see how he'll behave differently, because the roach isn't the mailbox. The roach is the roach.
Hmm.
The mailbox isn't going to run away if you try to smack it. The roach will.
Well, I don't think that comparison is as powerful an explanation.
Well, what would you call
But so
something? What
take
would
it
you
away from
how,
take it to something that blurs the line more, right? I think it's
like a germ?
Peter Singer, Princeton bioethicist, talked about how pigs are more sentient than newborn babies, and so they're more valuable, right, than say a
I,
6-month-old human.
Nah, that's a non sequitur. So like I
No, but
would say
I'm
something
saying
because
like
it's something
that's
more.
rather than a rock, rather than a roach, something that at least appears to have more of an experience, more brainwave activity, more measurables that we can connect to quote unquote sentience, or if nothing else, here's a either Yale or Princeton uh, professor who has devoted a significant portion of his life studies into
Mhm.
this idea, such that he's been talking about this for decades. Um,
I
why
don't know
is
if he
your
would.
standard better than his?
So all right, so I'm not exactly sure what his standard is, but if he's saying that a pig is more sentient than an infant,
Hmm.
I, that is wrong. Nothing is more sentient than something else. Like you can say it's more intelligent, it's more self-aware, but once it's sentient, that's it. That's like saying like 2 is more even than 4. Like it is, and that's it. Like there's no degrees of it.
Well,
Not
and I think
not
that's part of the issue is that he would say it's connected to a certain level of intellectual development. That in his example, pigs
Mhm.
have more so than humans. So you've got 5 criteria. What if there's a 6th one that's added on
I would
by
add
Peter
it.
Singer?
So no, you asked why did I have these 5 criteria? I
Hmm.
think the entirety of what we call the experience can be described with those. If there's a 6th one, I'd be more than happy to add it.
Okay.
But
So why
there's
wouldn't you? Or why don't you now? Why
well
don't you include a
well
level of intellectual development or at least level of physical brain development to assent to a particular understanding of sentience that humans have that a cockroach doesn't, or that a mailbox or a rock doesn't?
so I mean I take into so if when we talking about like the level of awareness
Uh-huh.
that varies, and so there are imperatives that apply to humans that wouldn't apply to a roach. Like for instance, if I was to torture another human in front of you, it would be it'd be 2 immoralities: the human is being tortured and you having to watch that, because you're going to suffer as well looking at that. Roaches don't seem to care. You
Don't
torture
seem
a,
to.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you said yourself they would exhibit what you describe as at least some form of self-defense or self-preservation, running away from the shoe that's aimed at them.
Yeah, for themselves, not for other roaches. Now, like, no, if the roach does care and is getting harmed by watching another roach be tortured,
Hmm.
it is immoral, whether I know it or not. Let's say, for this example, the roach does not know it. He does not care. The roach roach's well-being is not impacted in any way by watching another roach suffer. It's not. Is
How do
that
you
part?
know?
That
Again,
part wouldn't be
we come
moral.
back to the question of how do you know this is the
So,
case? I can agree with you,
mhm. So,
but that's not the agreement isn't the issue here. The question is how do you know
so
so that you're
knowing
building this moral system on it.
So knowing isn't relevant to its immorality. What matters is the reality of the matter. So if torturing a roach in front of another roach harms, if the spectator roach is being harmed by it, whether I know it or not, it's immoral, because the morality is determined by the reality, by the actual facts of the matter. Is the roach being harmed? Even if I don't know it. Like, I could be insane and I could run in your house and shoot you with a shotgun
Mhm.
thinking that I'm doing you a favor.
Sure.
I'm being immoral even if I don't know it, even if I think I'm helping you.
But and I'm not at this point asking if you violate that
Mhm.
because your beliefs. You're claiming to know these five are the components of moral realism. And at the root, I'm asking, how do you know it's those five?
No,
And it seems like we've gotten circular
those five
in our understanding here.
yeah, those five prongs are the components of experience, not moral realism. The realist part is the part that I'm saying exists regardless of what you think about it.
Okay, but
Like, it's not
those five components were how you define immorality. If it degrades one of those five aspects, and
because
so
that's
you've connected this to experience and connected this to sentience.
yeah. So it's since only sentient things experience, and I think your experience can be broken into those five prongs. If there's a sixth one, I'll be more than happy to add it. I just can't think of one. Anything else, it just falls into the other five prongs. If you could think of one, give me one.
Well, I mean, it seems like Peter Singer has provided an additional one, if
What
not
was
to
his?
replace one of those. The intellectual or brain development. That
That's
seems to
part
be
of health.
his.
That's part of health.
Is it part of health?
Yeah, yeah. Your
Because we're
brain
not
development, sure, yeah.
because a month old baby's brain can be healthy, but not as developed as say a 1 year old pig.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
Right.
as developed, but what we're talking about
Okay.
is like the longevity and efficient operation of that brain is going throughout the development process. That thing is sentient. If that baby can experience,
Hmm.
it is now sentient. Period.
Okay. Well, I mean, it seems like you've developed a nice moral framework for yourself, but when you want to describe its truth value to say that it connects to reality, I don't think you've bridged that gap.
So when we're talking about connecting to reality, okay. So no, what I described. So
Mhm.
you're familiar with uh, uh, how was it? Analytic proposition versus synthetic propositions. You know what I mean when I
Um,
say that?
I think I've heard of the terms, but it's been a while since I took philosophy in
Yeah,
college.
okay.
So
So analytic proposition, and this is something that there was this was a hang up the last
right.
time one of the last times we were discussing this. So analytic proposition is when I say um morality are acts that contribute to well-being, that is an analytic proposition. So it is disconnected from reality because I'm just describing a term. Just like when if I say a truck is the automobile with a flatbed, I'm
Okay.
just defining a term. The trucks don't have to exist. You
What's the distinction in your understanding between the analytic and synthetic propositions?
so analytic analytic are descriptions of terms. Uh, Synthetic are descriptions of reality. It's like first, like analytical truth, 1+1 is 2.
Okay.
For instance, because one doesn't exist, two
Right.
doesn't
Right.
exist,
So
right?
it's more ethereal. So it
Well,
seems like morality to say that there's moral realism it aligns with reality. Your moral system is a synthetic proposition, right?
So, well, what I gave when I say that morality is that which contributes to well-being, that is the
Mhm.
analytic proposition. Now we can use that analytic proposition to describe reality. You can't get to synthetic propositions without analytics.
How do you divorce the concept of well-being from acting in the world?
So
Right. So
what
if you're I get the idea that there's a proposition of morality,
mhm.
but when you start describing it in a manner compared to or the quality of well-being, that seems to be directly tied to how that proposition is impacting the world, so to speak. And so that seems to fall under the synthetic understanding rather than the purely analytical.
Okay, there are things that exist and there are descriptions of things that exist.
Okay.
Now, whether those things that exist regardless of whether or not we describe them. Like for instance, for instance, I can say a rock is a heavy thing. Now that's a poor definition of a rock, but
Sure.
irrelevant. That rock, that thing exists even if there's no one to describe it. For instance, before there was a mind in the universe, things were still happening.
Hmm.
But there were no analytical propositions.
Well, I
There were no
mean,
propositions at all. It was just
there was no time when there wasn't a mind acting, of course, because
well,
God
yeah, right.
created all
You
things.
think that's God? Okay, okay, sure. But okay, but what I'm saying, but what I'm saying, my definition is disconnected from reality because I'm just describing a term. Now I look in reality to see if reality fits the thing that I described. So remember
Okay.
when I said that I say a truck is a automobile with a raised automobile with a flatbed. You look
Okay.
in reality to see, is the automobile raised? Does it have a flatbed? Yes. Then this is a truck. When you say
Sure.
this is a truck, you're making a synthetic proposition. You're saying this thing is a truck. You're
Okay.
saying it has a flatbed because that's built into the definition. So when I describe my moral system, I'm
Okay.
only giving you analytic propositions. The synthetic propositions would apply when we talk about what things are and aren't murder. I mean, are and aren't moral.
I think I know where you're wanting to go in this conversation.
Yeah,
No.
right. So like, I'm gonna say right. So you see a murder. I mean,
Right.
you see you see an act. You say it's a murder. That's immoral because
Sure.
you're saying when you say it's immoral, you're saying it violates well-being and it violates all the prongs, right? Because if you're dead, you don't have any of them. You don't have you can't be healthy, wealthy, happy, or be secure or have freedom.
Yeah. I mean, as a general rule, I wouldn't uh, push back on your five criteria, although I would say that those are secondary matters in the moral equation, right? When you murder, when you steal,
Mm-hmm.
there there is a greater moral transgression than simply reducing someone's health, reducing someone's wealth, reducing someone's freedom, security, and I forget the other one.
Happiness.
Happiness, right? It's like we talked about before, the idea of moral realism. Like I would say morality, quote unquote, is intrinsic to humanity because we're made in the image of God, and as such, to murder is a violation of who we are and who that other person is. And first and foremost, it's a sin against our creator because it's bearing false witness about who he is. We're made in the image of God. God is not a murderer. When we murder, we're bearing false witness about our creator and we're damaging the image of God in another human being. And this difficulty that seems to arise when you're talking about sentience and experience and these criteria, but it just seems simpler in a practical sense to say we're made in the image of God. We experience the world categorically different than animals, than plants, than
Okay, so
anything else.
I got a question for you. Before I address it, before I ask you the question, there was a comment I want to address from
Okay.
Kian Arias. It says that's just a moral alt smuggled through the back door. And Iris, or how you pronounce your wrong your name? Like you're wrong. There's no alts. It's merely descriptive. So if I say murder is immoral, I'm not saying you ought not to murder. I'm just saying it is immoral.
Murder's
Period.
immoral, but go ahead. If you murder, worst case scenario, AAA is going to think that you're immoral.
I don't have to think it. I don't even have to exist.
Okay.
What
Okay. So worst case scenario,
you
you're
could
immoral in an uncaring.
You could commit the
universe.
murder, and I could be happy as a result of it. He violated somebody's health. It is immoral. Period.
Mhm.
Even if everybody was like, "Yay, murder."
Much like, was it the United Healthcare CEO that got shot, and a bunch of people were cheering about it, right?
Immoral.
To your point, yeah, still immoral. We can agree that act was immoral, but if you ask other people, their understanding of morality is different.
Yes,
And so part of my
now,
fundamental question to you that remains unanswered is, why is your definition better than theirs? Right? Why is your definition of morality better than mine or anybody else's?
Well, I'll say I think mine's better because there's no contradictions in it. It is coherent and there's not a single contradiction, not one that I can.
Well, it's easy to be coherent when you're, reasoning in a circle, right?
But
Like there's a tight spiral right there
where's the
at the bottom.
circle? Where's the circle?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about sentience and experience and these 5 characteristics, they seem to be kind of bunched around together at the bottom of this moral system. It's like, why those 5? Well, those 5 are characteristics of sentient beings. Okay, what's sentience? Someone who can experience. What can they experience? These 5 things.
No.
Well, okay, that's how I'm understanding it. So where am I wrong?
Those 5 things describe the experience. So anything that it is sentient, you can describe its experience through those 5 things, through its either its health, its wealth, its security, its freedom, its happiness. If there's like, think of any act, it's going to fall within those prongs. Okay. Whether you make it jealous, whether you steal from it, whether you murder it, whether you call it a bad name, like anything you can think of, like it's going to fall within those 5 prongs. I am more than happy to add to it.
Okay, but my thing about the circular reasoning thing is, so when you say we experience, would you say those are the means of experience then?
No, I would say those are the descriptions of experience. So like
so the descriptors. So when you talk about how we experience, it's through those 5 ways.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when I ask, why are those 5 ways critical, or the mechanism, the foundation of your moral system, because you say it's those 5 things that are related to sentient beings.
Yeah. So my moral system only apply to sentient things, and I think you can break up sentience into 5 prongs. Like, because there are ways where I can affect your health without affecting your wealth, and there's ways I could affect your freedom without affecting your health. So they're set. So that's why I put them out in prongs. But there are also ways that I can affect one and affect the others. For instance, let's say you're sick. I steal money from you. Well, now you're less wealthy, but now you needed medicine, so you can't afford that. So you're going to be less healthy. And because you're sick, you're going to be less happy. And maybe you plan on traveling, going somewhere, or doing something or whatever. Now I have also affected your freedom. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like they're related, but they're not the same thing. That's why I broke them out in prongs.
I get, but can you at least see why your view could be seen as circular, because of the relationship between sentience, experience, and these 5 elements that seem to be at the core of your moral framework?
I mean, so like, I mean, I don't make that much of a distinction between sentience and experience. Like, I would just
Sure.
say sentience, but like, if you ask, what's my definition of something that's sentient, I'll say something that can experience.
Okay.
That's all I would
And
say. And I'm just adding more information to what I think a sentient thing is. Like, I don't think artificial intelligence is sentient. It might become that way when it's able to experience. If when artificial intelligence is able to become happy, I would say, oh,
but before we get to how it applies, I think this is the big failing of the moral system is that circularity. It doesn't seem to be, I mean, to your point, you don't make a distinction. Like they're all just
so
kind of blended
so
here at the framework. So of
can we
course it's
can we
coherent, right?
can we explain the circle? I'm not following. So let's say
Yeah.
so I have so I'll say morality applies to sentient things,
Hmm.
and explain the circle. Because
So
I start with six, because from the way I see it, I'm starting with sentience.
right,
And then you ask me what I mean
sentience.
by sentience, just a thing that can experience. This is another description of sentience.
Uh-huh.
And then I say the experience can be broken up into the five prongs, which again
Right.
is just a description of sentience. And
But,
so I'm not
there's the
going.
circle, which is a description of sentience. So there's the circularity right there at the bottom, and the question of
What's the
why
description of
is it
sentience you said?
those five things? You said those five things
Yes.
describe sentience because they also describe experience, and sentience it means that one can experience.
So, would you say that so when I first say that a truck is a lifted vehicle with a flatbed, would you say that's circular because a truck is a lifted vehicle with a flatbed, and lifted vehicle with a flatbed is a truck? Would you say that's circular?
Now, I wouldn't say it's well. I mean,
Because the
if it were
relationship
true,
is functionally equivalent. The
I
term
mean,
means the definition means the term. That's the only thing that's happening here.
and I'm with you, but when it comes to your moral system, my question is why? Like, how do you know that your moral system is better than somebody else's? Like,
Because
what makes yours superior?
mine
And
mine has no contradictions. I would say if so,
okay, no contradiction,
yeah.
sure,
So
and that's why I
any
say,
idea, if you're able to point contradictions into it,
mhm.
then I would say that is going to be that's going to be inferior to one that doesn't have that.
I mean, we can agree in principle that having contradictions is not as good as having no contradictions, for
Right? Yeah,
sure.
because it essentially renders it incoherent.
Well, no, inconsistency is not the same as incoherence. Incoherence is an
Well,
internal consistency, whereas consistency is more with the outside. Sort of the difference
well,
between analytical and synthetic, right? Coherence refers to it's um,
I'm saying
not axiomatic,
if it makes
propositional truth in and
like
of itself.
sort of. So I guess I don't want to get too hung up on that. I guess to get I'll address it. I would say if something contradicts itself, you can't determine its truth value. Like, for instance, think about like the liar's paradox. This sentence is false, right? So that
Okay.
proposition that I just gave to you, was that true or false?
Well, if it's true, then it's false.
Right.
but yeah,
I would say that its truth value cannot be determined because it's incoherent. This sentence is false.
okay.
That is a contradiction.
Yeah, but we're not talking about those types of propositional uh, play on words. You're talking about something like morality. Like this
Right.
this
So
involves how humans interact with one another, how we
right.
behave in the real world.
And
I
so
mean, this
this might get
it's not like we're arguing over a hypotenuse triangle and the Pythagorean theorem.
right. But this is what I would say. So like, and this a lot of times gets me in trouble with a lot of atheists, some of my liberal friends. Like abortion,
Understandably.
the abortion topic, right?
Yeah,
For me, by my system, abortion is immoral. Period.
sure.
However,
We agree on that because it's murder.
I don't think it's murder.
How,
It's
how is it not okay?
I'll say it's a justified immorality.
So how is it not? What's your definition of murder?
Well, I mean, murder would be it would be an unjustified intentional killing of a human being. I would say,
Okay, so an unjust taking of a human life.
yeah,
That'd be hers.
unjustified. When I'm gonna say justified, I'm talking about in my system, and I'm talking about our
See,
limitations in contributing to well-being. So
that's where the subjectivity in practice comes out, not just in the creation of the system, but also in practice. Because
but
if you see a reason or an explanation as sufficient justification, you're going to naturally see that as a just act, and therefore it doesn't qualify for the category of unjust.
but the only subjective part is it's the justifiability, not the morality of it. It is. So when I say morality is objective, I am just
Mhm,
talking about the morality part. I am not
mhm.
talking about the justification part, because that's obviously contingent on the mind based on what you know and what your capabilities are.
Yeah, but once you smuggle in this idea of justified, you can justify just about anything given the circumstances.
No, you can't. And
I mean,
this is what
tr-
that's why I'll say
maybe you wouldn't, but other people would. And then you have to explain why your explanation trumps theirs, because their experience, their justification to them is just as
and
strong as yours is to you.
so so,
And you
so
don't have a way to override their moral
it,
authority in that realm.
it's not just as strong because it's it's not based on someone's opinion. It's not
It
subjective.
is. It's based on your opinion. It's
No, no,
subjectively
it's not.
derived.
No,
You said
it's
this early on in the
no,
conversation,
no, no, no,
right?
no, 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 no. So remember in the scenario that I gave you, where it's
Which one?
a
The cockroach in the mailbox?
no, no, no. So we're talking about
Okay.
like you're a cop, you're walking the beat,
Hmm.
and I point a firearm at you.
Oh, right, right, right.
It's not loaded, right? So it's based on your knowledge, not your opinion.
Is
So let's say you know
That's not even knowledge, right?
that
That's a
is no
perception.
total whether whether you know the gun is unloaded or not is going to be a knowledge fact. It's going to be a fact about your knowledge. You can't shoot me and say it's justified just because you think it is.
Why
That
not? I
that
wouldn't have shot you if I didn't think it was justified.
none. But what I'm saying is, okay, but the justification is contingent upon your knowledge, a contingent upon your ability to contribute to well-being, and your under which is your ability is going to be determined by what you know. It's not based on your opinion. So when I say you understand the difference here. When I say subjective, we're saying based on the mind. Maybe a better word is relative, but
Mhm.
based on your knowledge is very different from being based on your opinion.
Well, see, and that's where the use of the term knowledge is problematic, because we can't know things that are false, right?
No, okay. So think about in a scenario. So think about this scenario. So when
It's a belief. It's a conclusion based on certain perception of reality. But
yeah, that will
I
be a
can't say
knowledge.
I know my life was in danger if somebody is holding an unloaded weapon, because to your point, the truth is my life is not in danger because the gun is unloaded. So I can't say I was justified because I knew he pulled a gun on me and would shoot me and kill me, because that proposition is false. I can't know something that is itself untrue.
Yes, but that's not your opinion. That's your knowledge.
Okay, so perception of
Mhm.
reality, right? Which, I
Uh,
mean, if it's not in the category of knowledge, it's a false understanding. It's for lack of a better way to say it, it's an opinion that's wrong, or a
hold on
false
1 second.
belief.
I want to just one comment. Ken Harris keeps saying a bunch of really dumb comments.
Oh
Like
no, I think Ian's spot on
I
for a
think,
lot of no.
well, he can't. Well, really? You think this is spot on? This is nonsense.
No,
Like, maybe he just
I've only
missed the
seen about
beginning of
half of
the.
them.
Maybe he just missed the
I'm
beginning of the
involved in this
episode.
conversation, bro. I ain't worried about the
Okay,
comments.
okay, I'll just ignore it. Ken Harris, email us. Come on the show, man. Other than that, I'll just ignore it. Okay, so when so think about this is I'm holding a number. There's a number.
Hmm.
that I'm holding, right? That I'm holding a certain amount of fingers up. Would you say your knowledge of that is subjective?
My knowledge,
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, knowledge is subjective because basic
Right, because it's based
definition
on
of
the
knowledge
mind.
is
And so
justified. No,
right.
no, no.
So now
It's justified true belief.
so
Do
now
do I believe it? Is it true? And am I justified in believing it?
now
So, and that last part is the subjective aspect of it. Do I have sufficient justification to
so
believe it?
now because I think we might be equivocating on subjective. Because when
Okay.
I said subjective, I'm saying based on your knowledge, not based on your opinion. Because earlier you had said somebody could commit a murder and they could justify it, and I say it's not justified, and then both of our arguments would be equal. No, they would not.
Okay.
They,
Let,
they,
let,
they would
let's
not be
let's use
equal.
your
If we
your,
were
your your
basing it
example.
on a if we were basing it on opinion, sure it would be. If
Okay.
we're
So
basing it
forget
on
about
knowledge,
opinion,
mhm,
perception, right? Because
well,
there is a certain subjective perception that was involved. But for example, to use the
mhm,
numbers under the table, right? If I tell you I'm holding up 4 fingers,
yeah.
and then I ask you, how many fingers am I holding up?
You told before,
I
but
told
because
you 4,
yeah, but
but
I
I'm
don't, I
actually
don't.
holding up 3,
Yeah,
right?
I
Did
wouldn't
you
know that.
know I was holding up 4?
No,
Exactly. So
but
when the bad guy pulls an empty gun, right? To say I know my life was in danger is false because there's information I didn't have, right?
so okay,
The
and
reality of the situation was my life was not in danger from being shot, whether I thought it was or not. Do
and
you
that
see that?
yes, and so
Okay.
here's the thing. So when you shoot somebody and you're acting in what you believe to be self-defense, right? It is immoral, period. Right? I point a gun at you, you
I would
shoot me.
disagree with that, but go
Okay,
ahead.
well, okay, but think about how I'm defining it,
Well,
right?
sure, but I mean,
So
remember, we're completely different
sure, okay,
foundations
well,
here.
within my system, because you saying it was there's
Mhm.
a contradiction in here or something. Oh no, you said it was circular. I'm
Right.
just trying to figure out. Okay, so according to my system, you shoot me, it doesn't matter what the reason is. You harm me, I'm hurt. You shoot me, that's
Mhm.
going to violate my health. Period. That's just the ontological fact. So it's
Right.
immoral. Now, your knowledge, right? Not your opinion, but your knowledge of my intentions and my capabilities is what's going to justify. It's going to determine whether it's justified. So you can't shoot me because, like, you felt like shooting me. So it's just your opinion. No,
Right. No,
if
that wouldn't be the justification,
right.
right?
So
It
I'm
would be
look
a belief
right.
that was incorrect.
So exactly. So no, so when I say subjective, I'm still using reality. It is the ontological fact that you either did or did not know I was capable of shooting you. It
I
isn't
did
so.
not.
Let's say you did not know. That is a fact. That is
Okay.
not up for debate. That is not up for opinion. It is a
Sure.
fact. And if you, since you don't know that, you would be justified in shooting me because you have no idea. You see what I'm saying? That's why that
Right, but
I
that
don't think I
that
don't think you have to.
proposition is not sufficient to justify taking someone's life.
You don't, right? You don't, like, if I point a gun at you, you don't think
No,
you justified in shooting
I'm
me?
saying the statement I do not know if my life is in danger is
No,
not sufficient justification.
no. So I mean, so
So that knowledge, like even if I know or
you
that
can you
my
can work
life
under
is not,
these.
if I knew my life was not in danger, then shooting you in this scenario
That'd be
would in
immoral.
fact be
Be
immoral.
yeah, it'd be unjustified immorality.
We would both agree that it's immoral.
Yeah,
If
well,
I
yeah,
believed incorrectly my life was in danger or somebody else's life was in danger and I shot you, that's where we have the divergence
it's
because
still a,
your understanding of morality, as Kian points out, actually is predicated upon well-being and sentience, which still, as of yet, doesn't have a requisite explanation to justify why that's the central aspect of it. I
he
mean,
doesn't
you've
correct,
explained it,
but
and
he
at a
doesn't.
certain point. Oh,
First,
go ahead.
Kean completely gets this wrong. He says Triple H keeps acting like well-being is a moral north star handed down by logic, like as if you
I
can
don't know
look
that
at
I'd
the
go
lot.
that far, but yeah.
Yeah, that is nonsense. As if the logical absolutes describe morality, like you can get morality just from logic itself. That is nonsense. I didn't say anything like that. So
Well,
like,
to his point, though, or his Herb, I'm not sure. To
mhm.
Kean's point, I think uh, that once you have picked out what you see as a reflection or a description of sentience, and you have set that as your value, at that point, your moral system makes sense.
Yeah, we're not. So when you add value, you're adding extra stuff. You're no longer
But
talking about when you
but
said
that's
like
in
I
that's
value those things.
intrinsic to your position, though,
It's
is
not.
you have valued sentience,
No, I have. So, no,
so
no,
you don't
no.
care about sentience.
I do care about sentience, but that's but
Okay.
that but the analytic proposition isn't based off of that. Just like I don't have.
It's based on the supremacy of sentience as expressed through experience by health, wealth, happiness,
Yeah, all I did was
freedom,
define the
security.
term. Remember, all I did was define the term. Kind of
But
like if
you're
I were to
defining the
say
term, but your expression of this definition makes sense in and of itself, but what is missing is the justification of why it's this way. Like why sentience is at the
so,
core of your moral framework.
let's
Why?
talk about that because Ken, he just said the same thing. He says it doesn't matter where it came from, logic or not. You still haven't just. And I'm like, if it doesn't matter where it came from or not, can you? Will you at least admit you were wrong, saying that I'm acting as if it's handed down from logic? You, you're just objectively wrong about that. But because now you're saying it doesn't matter. But okay, so we talk about justifying it. So I have an analytic proposition, and I say my analytic proposition is that morality is that which contribute to well-being. You want me to
Right.
justify that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. It is to
What
justify why
what what the
why morality is connected exclusively to well-being in the terms that you've laid out.
so now you don't justify analytic propositions.
Well,
It,
you
it,
can
it
analyze
it doesn't
them,
even make any sense to do that.
right? If I were to say, 1 + 1 = 3, we can
Well,
analyze that proposition. It's an analytical proposition, right?
yeah,
It's not,
that'd be
it's not
wrong,
synthetic, and it is
but
wrong because, and we know this because we can ask questions, we can scrutinize, we can test that to see if it's actually uh, comporting true or comportative truth, right? So
okay.
similarly, I'm asking the questions of this analytic proposition, and this shield of, I mean, to it seems like, and I don't want to be too strong here, but
Mhm,
when Christians get accused of saying, well, you just have to believe it, you just have to take it on faith, like
mhm.
at root, that seems to be a description of why sentience. It's like
No,
that's
and
that's what you've
here
picked out.
here's the big distinction here.
Okay,
Here's the
and
big
so
distinction
I
here.
laid up that softball for you. Knock it out.
Okay, so when you say take something on faith, you're talking about a synthetic proposition. You're talking about
Mm-mm.
there is something. No. Hold on. If you say
Okay,
if you say God exists, you're talking about reality here. That there is this infinite mind that is has his fingers in reality doing things, right? You're making a synthetic proposition. Those need to be justified. Synthetic propositions do not. If you say
you mean
uh
analytical?
I'm sorry, yeah, analytical propositions do not, because you're just describing a term. You're not saying anything about reality, so it makes
Okay.
no sense to justify it.
Okay,
If you
so
say
as an alternative, let me put this out there. I'm not going to say God exists. I'll
Mhm.
say God is the precondition for intelligibility and morality.
that's a synthetic proposition.
How is it synthetic? It's reasoning. It's
Be-
theory.
Because no, but here you're
You,
stating a fact about reality. You're saying
correct.
that, and yeah, that's not that's synthetic. If you're stating a fact about reality, that's synthetic.
How is morality? Your description of morality and well-being. How
Mhm.
is that not a description, equally
So
a description of
let's
of
say
reality?
let's say there nothing existed. Let's say there was a universe.
No. Forget the hypothetical. I
Uh-huh.
want to ask your statement
Yeah.
that morality is based on or determined by impact on well-being.
Yeah.
How is that not a statement of reality that is itself a synthetic proposition?
So when I define it, so when I say morality, morality is that which contributes to well-being, right? You
That which contributes. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Nothing has to be alive. It
Okay,
would still be an analytic truth. Because I could also say a dragon is a reptile with wings that breathes fire. That that's still an analytic proposition. The thing does not have to exist. You see what I'm saying? So like I'm not
okay,
making
but similarly, God prior to creating anything, it's still just as true
so if
that
you were to,
God
if you were to
is a
say
precondition for intelligibility and morality.
if you were to say like if you were to say if you were to say like I def I define God as the precondition for intelligibility.
I'm not
That's
defining God as that. I'm more describing morality, right? Because morality involves intelligibility. We've got to be able to communicate
so
what this
what
standard is, and in order to justify the moral standard and the intelligibility to understand it and communicate it, God is required for that.
okay
That's a
so
statement of reality,
but
regardless of whether you or I exist.
but okay, you made it you had drawn this analogy with like the presuppositional claim that God is the precondition for intelligibility. Okay, well, are God when you say that? Because
Mhm.
this is what matters, whether it's an analogy, whether it's a synthetic or analytic proposition. Are you merely when you say the precondition intelligibility? Are you describing God, or are you saying it is a fact that without God we would lose intelligibility?
Both.
You said both.
Yeah.
Okay, so the analytic part would not.
It's a description of
The,
God. Like he
okay,
is, and
that
actually no, it's more a description of intelligibility and morality.
okay.
That God
But
is a prerequisite for those things.
so the
Uh,
analytic part
mhm.
would not require a justification. You said you're doing both.
But
The synthetic part would.
your description, morality is that which contributes to well-being, is
Mhm.
itself a statement of reality.
No, it's just that I'm defining a term.
No. Okay, so your description of morality is not connected to reality at all.
No analytic proposition is.
Okay,
That's how they work.
okay.
That's
So
how
let's
if
follow
I
that
say
down. When you say something is immoral, you're saying that it does not contribute to positive well-being, it degrades well-being.
mhm,
And so
that
when you
that's
say
synthetic.
murder is immoral, that is not a statement of reality.
No, that so
Then,
no, well, okay. So if you say murder is immoral, no, that is analytic. If you point to it,
right.
if you say this thing is a murder, this thing is immoral, that would be synthetic.
So to make sure I'm clear, so when you say murder is immoral, that's
Mhm.
not a description of reality.
No, because murders don't need to exist. If
Okay.
if there were no humans, there'd be no murder, and you could still say murder is
Why
immoral.
why humans? Why are we limited to humans?
Well, you
Because
could say
you said
anything.
sentience expands to not
Yeah,
just humans.
yeah,
Theoretically AI, but there's
y-
animals that
yeah,
exhibit
but
and even some plants
I just
that
wouldn't
that
call it. I say it's immoral. It's
but
immoral to kill a puppy. I wouldn't call it
so
a murder.
here's the shifting foundation here, and that's part
No,
of
no,
the
that's not
problem.
shifting. That's not a shifting. But I
Mhm.
just wouldn't call it murder. We can call it murder if that's what you want to do. But
It
generally, when
doesn't
people
have
say
anything to do
murder,
with what I want to do. But I think that's one of um, the
do,
deficiencies in your
do you
understanding of
think?
morality is when you simultaneously want to use it to describe morality, but also claiming it's not a description of reality. And
No,
your
that's not what's
definition,
going on. So
your description of
murder.
morality is not a description of reality, but mine is somehow different because I'm connecting
You
it to God.
No, it has nothing to do with the connection to God. It's about, are you making a claim about reality? This murder
Aren't
thing.
we
I
all?
don't know.
When you say, if you believe in
No,
moral realism, the morality has a connection to reality.
no.
Yes.
So there's a thing.
No.
No. So when
Okay.
moral realism isn't a so moral realism itself isn't a synthetic proposition. That it is a fact that this state of affairs exists, and we can describe that state of affairs as your health. Mhm. Okay, whether your
I,
health exists is irrelevant to the fact.
I
Is
disagree,
irrelevant
because
to
if
the
you're talking about my
proposition.
health, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I was okay. So the, I said a truck is a truck is a lifted vehicle with a flatbed. Now, do you think I'm making a statement about reality?
Make the statement again.
A truck is a lifted vehicle with a flatbed.
Sure.
Am I making a statement about reality?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's wrong.
Because when I observe
I'm
reality, if I see a lifted vehicle with a flatbed,
no.
that's a truck.
You're making a different proposition. I'm not calling anything a truck.
I'm not
I'm
making
just
a
a
proposition. I'm applying your
no.
proposition.
No, when you apply you're applying my synthetic. You're applying my analytic proposition. That is what a synthetic proposition is. A synthetic
Hmm.
proposition is the application of an analytic proposition. So if I say a truck is a lifted vehicle with a flatbed, and then I see another thing, I say that's a truck.
Okay.
I'm applying my analytic proposition to this thing,
Okay.
and
So
that's a synthetic proposition. So
so
synthetic propositions. Mhm.
similarly, regardless of whether or not we have intelligibility, regardless of whether or not there is morality, to the degree that those are there, they are predicated on God. So God is the prerequisite for those things. That's
So
a basic
are
statement.
are you
Now, then
describing?
you can
No, but
say
hold on.
something is immoral, and you're saying it in an intelligible way. That is the same connection to reality. As soon as you start making statements of morality, making statements in an intelligible way, you are applying it in the same way, and that's when it becomes synthetic.
So okay, so when you said like God is the grounding for what was that last sentence you had said? God is the definition or
Yeah,
something.
God is the prerequisite for intelligibility and morality.
Okay, so are you just when you say that, are you just defining what they think the term God is? Or are you talking about the actual
No,
thing
I'm not.
that
I'm
exists that
not
you would call
defining
God?
God. I'm not defining God.
Okay, so
Um,
so all right, so
that's the wrong emphasis. I've told you
okay,
it's not a description of God. It's a description of intelligibility and morality. Namely,
so
both of them are predicated on God.
I think this is where the misunderstanding is. Okay, so
Okay.
if you say God is the precondition for intelligibility,
Right.
now with that proposition, that isn't referring to God, the being, the omnipotent
Right.
being that lives in the sky. That's referring to the word God,
No, it's
the
referring to
label.
the terms intelligibility and morality.
No, no, no,
That's
no,
what
no,
it's
no,
describing. That's
no, no. Okay, but the thing, if you say when you say God is that,
mhm.
the word God isn't referring to the guy who made the universe. It's talking about the label, the word God.
Well, no, we can add to that a particular description definition of God, but that's not what I'm doing in
No,
the
okay, but
statement, and that's why I'm saying the statement is just as analytical as yours
so
is.
okay, so no. If you when you say God,
Okay.
when you say God is the condition for intelligibility,
Hmm.
are you talking about the phoneme God, or are you talking about the actual thing that you worship?
I'm not sure of the distinction.
Are
I
you talking
mean,
about? Okay,
it's the God that we all know,
okay,
right?
okay. So that
Just like
it
when you
is
say
no longer
well-being, you are importing a particular understanding of well-being. When you say morality is that which comports to well-being, you're defining morality by saying well-being, and well-being has comes with it this baggage. I don't mean that in a bad way, but when you say well-being, you are importing or implying health, wealth, security,
Yeah, the promise.
happiness, right? So that there are when you start fleshing it out, to your point, that's when you start connecting it to reality. So all I'm saying is my
I'm
statement.
still just defining words. That's why I want
Okay,
to. This is
so
this is really important.
defining
This
terms.
is
Okay,
really
God
important.
is the creator of all things.
Okay, no. Now, when you say God is the creator of all things, okay. Now, when you said the word God,
Hmm.
what do you that word in that sentence? God is the creator of all things. That proposition. Let's focus on the term God here.
Okay.
Are you talking about the omnipotent thing that you worship, or are you just talking about the actual word?
Uh,
The
so I'm
actual
gonna
word
need you.
God is
Uh-huh.
not omnipotent. That word does not do anything.
Okay. Well, I mean, all words aren't in themselves the thing that's being described,
Yes,
right?
they're
When you
not.
say health, that
Okay,
word health is not
but
health.
what I'm asking, what you're referring to, because
Well,
if
yeah.
you're referring to the thing that you worship, that is a synthetic proposition that requires a justification. If when you
Okay.
say God,
So
you're just talking about the actual label, not a
okay.
being that is capable of anything, but just the
Okay. So
word
when you say
God.
well-being, do you mean the words well-being, or do
Yes,
you mean
I mean the words. I'm saying this is a word. This is what this word means. That is what an analytic proposition is. So do you remember?
that
So
is
remember.
hilarious?
So do you remember when we were talking about, like I said number? I said 1 + 1 is 2, right?
Sure. Yeah.
One does not exist. Two does not exist. There are things that can be described with one, things that can be described as two. There are things that can be described as health,
Okay.
right? But that is separate from the label itself. That is what I was saying. So that doesn't require any justification. We're just talking about a word here.
Okay, but that's just it. We're not talking about words, because when we use words,
Mhm.
we're using them to your point. The the word one isn't itself a thing, but
Mm-mm.
it is referring to a concept that is real, that is consistent with reality. Just like when you say morality is that which comports to well-being,
That
you
concept,
can
I would say that concept isn't real. There are things that are real that can be described with that concept. Like this is
okay, and
this is one finger. This isn't one. This is one finger. You see what I'm
right,
saying? So
yeah,
to break this to bring this back to what you had said maybe 20 minutes ago, when you said that when I described my analytic proposition about morality is well-being, and you're saying that's somehow equal or equivalent to when Christians say you just got to take it by faith. These are very different things.
no, I
It's
get that.
very
It
different.
was an analogy. It wasn't a one-to-one comparison. So I just wanted to
Okay.
try to help describe my view of it in a way that I thought you might be able to
And
grab hold of.
that's I'll say that the analogy fails because when I say, like, it is a very different thing from saying that a dragon is a fire-breathing flying reptile. That's different
Mhm.
from saying dragons exist.
Right, but
Because
when you say fire, when you say
Mhm.
breathing, and when you say reptile, all of those words are referring to aspects of reality.
Yeah, but you could also have analytic propositions for fire, for reptile, and all that kind of stuff, and we could keep doing that. But we fortunately we
Ultimately, though, we
understand what
use
those
these
things are.
words to describe reality. That's what even an analytic proposition is itself a way to ultimately understand and even explain reality,
Yes,
right? So the
but
proposition itself is still connecting to reality in a sense. That's why when you say well-being, for example, or morality and well-being in
mhm.
your description, those words are picked for your description specifically because of their connection to what other people would understand as real or reality.
Those are picked because of because of my analytic propositions of those things. It's like I could give you an analytic proposition for health. I can give you one for wealth, and,
Yeah,
I even did that for wealth. Right? Those are still all analytic,
but they're
and
all descriptions of how that term describes reality. And so
so.
that's part of the problem is this
But
kind of
no, but
back
see,
and forth
but here's the
of
thing: you don't need you don't even need the reality. All I'm doing is defining the term.
sure.
I'm just saying what this thing means. And now once I have that, so there are no justifications required because I'm just defining a term. Just like it make no sense to say if I say a 12 inches equal a foot, you say justify it. Like, well, what would that look like? I
Well,
just all I did was
yeah, no,
define a
that's
word.
no,
Right.
that it's a great question to ask because you can go back into history and see how measurements were developed, how particularly our measurements were developed, right? A
That
foot rather than a meter or a
that would
kilometer.
be irrelevant. I wouldn't have to
It
if I
wouldn't be
say
irrelevant if you're asking the question why. That's my point.
if
And for you to put a wall around your explanation and go, it's a definition, it doesn't need to be explained, it doesn't need to be justified, and then in another breath say none of it's real, right? Because it
I
doesn't
didn't
have any
say
connection,
no, I
but
didn't say none
because
of
it
it's
has no
real.
connection to
I
reality.
didn't say any of that. So I didn't say any of that.
Roll the tape back. I promise you it's in there.
I didn't say none of it's
I know
real.
it's in there,
I
just
said
like I
what
knew that gun was unloaded.
no, I didn't say none of it's real. I said none of it has to be real.
Okay.
So okay, so like if I say 12 inches equal a foot,
Hmm.
you don't need anything to be equal to a foot or to 12 inches.
Right.
Like nothing has to be equal to that.
But
Like
when
you
you
don't
say
even
a
need a
foot in the
universe.
context of a measurement,
Mhm.
that word communicates a certain description definition that is describing reality.
Yes, and so now you said forget about what when I say that word, what you understand. Forget the inference that you make about it. Just
Mhm.
listen to what I said about it. Right? If I say a foot is 12 inches, that is the only thing. That's the only thing that matters. I don't have to justify any inferences you draw from it because I didn't say any of those
What
things. I'm
if
just
you
saying
want
if
your words to make sense to me, you have to speak in a way that I can understand, right?
yes, and
If you
that's
were
how you
speaking
define it.
Chinese, I don't know if you know the language,
Mhm.
but I couldn't understand a word you were saying. You could be saying lots of true things, and I would not agree to any of them because I have no idea what you're saying.
Okay, so think about it. So let's say if I say this equals a foot, how would I justify it? Would I need to justify it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
Now, how would I do that?
with a measuring
Right, I can
tape
measure it.
measure or ruler.
Right,
Yeah.
so I can measure it. Right, so that is how you justify synthetic propositions. If you say a foot is equal to 12 inches, there's nothing to measure because a foot doesn't exist.
Hmm.
12 inches doesn't exist. Right, so there.
I'm with you.
Okay,
But at the same time,
that's
when you
why.
say
So
a foot
I,
is 12 inches, that statement in and of itself is a way to understand reality.
yes, I agree.
Okay.
That's okay, but now, now you had said earlier that I'm making it like a like a proposition based on faith. You understand? It does not
I'm
require
not saying
any
you're
faith.
making a proposition based on faith.
Would you say that it's
I mean,
equal to faith?
I no, because I don't see as strong an argument for your standard as I would for faith in the Christian biblical
So
sense.
okay, so now when we talk about like so faith in a biblical sense, all right. So you had said that okay, you define morality
Mhm.
is what was it that which corresponds to the mind of God, or I forget what was the terminology you used.
I don't think I actually offered up a strict definition of morality, and I don't know that I would. Um, I actually didn't come prepared with one, to be honest with you.
Okay,
um, but I
I'll
would
say
say
as
that
a Reformed Christian, I would have said morality is that which corresponds to the nature of God.
I would say to the nature of God, and I would also want to include the purpose of creation. And so
Okay.
that leads into, because I think a
I think we're being
necessary
redundant. I think we're being redundant. If you,
it,
I think if
it
you just
might
say
be
God's nature, I think that's it.
and I'd be okay with that. I think the moral law is consistent with God's nature. So there's a moral law that's been revealed to us that is certainly consistent with God's nature, but there's also a component of the creation and the purpose of creation that is involved with that, because as we said before, murder is a violation of the character of God, but it is also a violation of the purpose for which He's created humanity, right? So there's a purpose,
And
a necessity of purpose in that. Now, if you say that as redundant, fine. We can just stick with the character of God. I'm good with that.
okay, so now when I say morality, if I'm talking about well-being, and when you say morality, you're talking about that which corresponds to God's nature. We're just talking about different things. We're using the same words here. Now, here's the
Yeah,
thing, because I don't care about what word you use. Long as you care about well-being, long as your act contributes to well-being, you can call it whatever you want. You can
sure.
say it's not morality, it's diggity, right? And in that sense, that I want to be a diggity person. I want to my
No diggity, no doubt.
right. Right. I would say murder would be very undiggity. So
Right.
okay, so that's why. So when I say that, I'm not really even contradicting what you're saying. You're just talking about something else. You're talking about something that I don't value. Now,
Right. And that's
now,
why value is at the core of your understanding of morality, because it's those criteria that you've used, because they
it's not.
hold greater importance than other terms, other things that you could
So
put up with that.
here's
So
the thing. So
for example, your understanding of well-being excludes the spiritual health, right? The
no,
spiritual wealth, the spiritual happiness of an individual,
nope,
because as an atheist,
wrong.
there's no accounting of. I mean, you can
Yeah,
say propositionally you haven't excluded that, but practically you certainly
I
have,
haven't.
because you've eliminated the source
I,
of the spiritual aspect of our existence.
I have. So like if okay. So here's the thing. I don't have any evidence of a spirit. I don't see any evidence of us of the spirit.
Sure
Well,
you do.
however, if you were to demonstrate that, I would just add that to
So you
well-being.
so you
Now, when you talk
acknowledge
about
your definition of well-being
no,
excludes that.
no, so let's talk about this. So if let's say let's talk about this. Hold on.
You'd add it, but you're not excluding it now.
No. Let's talk about this.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so you talk about if I were to harm your spirit, what would that do?
I'm not I'm
What
not
would that
using
impact?
spirit in a noun sense. I'm using it in an adjective sense. Your
I,
spiritual health, your spiritual wealth, spiritual happiness,
that would just be
spiritual.
health. Your spiritual happiness would just be happiness. You can put whatever adjective you want. I could say your chakra happiness. I could say your key happiness,
You
your key
could,
health. Yeah,
but you're intentionally not.
no,
And you said
because
yourself you would add it, which means it's not part of it now.
no. Okay, so no. So when I meant by added, like for instance, like I could talk about like if I were to harm your brain, if I hit you in the head with a bat that harms your brain, that's gonna violate your health, right? Hitting
Mhm.
you in the head, hitting you in the spirit with a bat doesn't violate your health, because I don't think spirits exist. But if you were to demonstrate, if you were to demonstrate that hitting you in the head with hitting your spirit with a bat would somehow impact your health, then I would say now that is immoral. That's what I mean by added. I wouldn't add spirit as another prong. Spirit would just fall into one of the other ones. And when
Mhm.
you were even describing them, you were saying spiritual health, spiritual wealth, etc. It just falls into one of my prongs. What I'm saying is that I would add that as in I would add it like to other things that affect the prongs.
Mhm.
Banging your finger affects your health. Perhaps
Right.
banging
It's a
your spirit,
physical action.
perhaps banging your spirit affects your health as well. That's what I mean by added.
Mhm.
So, so even if you have a spirit, it doesn't change the system at all. It
It,
falls into the five prongs.
but your 5 prongs are not inclusive of spiritual realities.
How is it
Because you
not?
said yourself, you reject it. You don't have evidence of the spiritual realities. You would add them later. You can't add something that's already there.
No. So when I say added, I'm not talking about added to the prongs. It
Hmm.
wouldn't. So I wouldn't have say health, freedom, spirit. That's not what I'm
No,
saying. I would do.
I'm not saying that, but
Okay.
your understanding of health is limited to physical health,
Okay. No.
right?
It's not.
There's no
It's
inclusive.
not. That is definitely not the case. Because if
Okay.
you okay, if the spirit remember the epistemology was totally irrelevant here,
Well,
right?
yeah,
So
you want it to be irrelevant, but it's not. But go ahead.
no, okay, here's why it's not. Because the reality is the only part that matters. Just like I said, I could walk into your house. If I was to shoot you, thinking I'm doing you a favor, it would still be immoral. So if I were to sprinkle some stuff on you, some Satan juice on you or something, and that harmed your
Yes.
spirit, if I did, even if I didn't know it, it would still be immoral because it impacts
Here we go.
your experience.
But none of that is analytical in nature, right?
The stuff
None
that
of
the stuff that I was describing, no,
right,
those were
right.
synthetic
Because you
propositions.
said that's the important part of it,
No, that's not.
right?
What do you mean?
It- how did you mean when you said that? I thought I heard you say that's the important part of it.
I don't know what you
Is
mean. There was the. I don't know.
is the reality, like how it actually
Yeah,
it affects
I was saying
reality
the reality is all that matters
is all that
in
matters. That's okay.
regard to whether it's moral.
Okay.
Your epistemology does not matter. It's completely ontological.
I disagree with that. However, I
You
am
can
glad to
you
see
can
you
disagree with
recognize
my
the importance
definition.
of reality in the moral equation, because it seems like you've been pushing against that for the majority of this conversation,
No,
because
I have
your
not been.
analytic proposition
I,
is not a description of reality, right?
no analytic proposition is a description of reality. That is not what that word means. If you
Okay.
so reality does not matter. You're just talking about a term. So if I was to say God is the precondition for reality, as long
Okay.
as I'm not talking about the magical being, I'm just talking about the label. As long as I'm just talking
Okay.
about the label, that is an analytic proposition.
And
We
so
all work away.
I would rewind and say that based on what's happened in our conversation now, the biggest deficiency is a hesitance to put the rubber to the road in reality.
I can put it. Let's put it the rubber to the road in red. But Key and Iris, this is how I know he is not listening to anything. He says just because AAA doesn't believe in spirit doesn't necessarily mean that spirituality isn't part of reality. Duh, that's literally what I just said. I said your epistemology is irrelevant.
Hmm.
Just the ontology. That's it.
Well,
Like
I know you believe
I don't
the
even,
epistemology
I don't even
is.
know. He's
Go ahead.
email the show. Come on, I'll be back from Europe
He is
mid
one
June.
chat at a time.
Yeah. All right. So you said let's put it on the road. I mean, let's put the rubber to the road.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do it. What's the problem?
Well, no, the insistence of keeping this moral standard in a space of, I would say, arbitrary abstraction, right? And so it's easy to um, keep from having to make moral judgments. Like we said, murder, right? The unjust
Mhm.
taking of human life, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's analytical or synthetic is not nearly as important. I hope we can agree as whether or not there is an actual human life being harmed. Can we agree on that at least?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
would say reality is more important than the description of reality.
Fabulous.
Mhm.
So when it comes to, for example, the reality of unborn babies getting
Mhm.
killed by the thousands, just in this country.
Are you talking about God? Or are you talking about abortion?
Abortion.
Because God was
No.
killing a bunch of babies too. But okay,
Well, I mean,
is
he's able to
we're
do
gonna put
that
it all
because
in.
he's
We're
the
gonna put it all
creator.
in one. We're gonna put it all in one box. So you're saying God gets because God created babies, he gets to kill babies.
God can do whatever he wants to with creation.
I
That is
don't
his
think.
prerogative.
I don't
The
really.
Bible says that. Yes.
So God can rape babies.
Well, God would not rape babies.
That's
That's a
not what I
ridiculous.
that's not what I asked. You said God can
Yeah.
do whatever he wants. I'm asking, can God rape babies? I'm not asking would he.
I would, okay, to frame it in that question, I would say no, because he would not want to.
So he can't do it because he doesn't want to.
To say
That
can or
doesn't
can't
that doesn't.
is real. God can't sin, right? To the degree that you
I didn't
need
say
the
whether it's
words
sin.
rape babies
I
as
wouldn't
a
even.
sin.
I'm not saying baby rapes a sin. I'm just saying, can God do it? You said God can do whatever he wants with his creation. That would he made babies, so he'd be able to rape babies. Whether he wants to is relevant. Okay, so then so there are things God can't do with his own creation.
Yeah, I didn't say he can do anything full stop. I said he can do anything he wants with creation. It is his prerogative. And nothing happened. Yeah,
so if God wants to rape babies, he can do it, and it'd be moral.
I mean, you can say that, but it's not going to be true because he does not.
I'm asking. Yeah. So because what I would say,
I've answered the question. The answer is no.
You did
because he doesn't want to.
You did it because for me, I am capable of doing that, even regardless of whether or not I want to. But that has no bearing on this morality.
Well, I'm not. I mean,
but something is immoral just because I want to do it.
All right, but you want to reach out into hypotheticals again. See, you're going from the real to the hypothetical. You're reaching. Yes, it is. There's no indication anywhere in history that God would want to rape a baby.
I didn't say God would want to do it. I was asking.
No, but you keep asking the question. You asked this of Kyle the last time he was on. So hammered that in there because it's a complete hypothetical. It's complete abstraction. I'm saying put the rubber to the road.
No, this is functionally equivalent. See, when I describe my moral system, and you ask, well, could I murder somebody? It is functionally equivalent. Like, no, I wouldn't murder somebody, and I don't want to murder somebody, but that's irrelevant to whether or not it's moral based on a definition of morality. If you define morality as God gets to do whatever he wants to do with his creation,
that's not how I define morality, and you know that.
Okay, so it's
consistent with his character.
You said God can do whatever he wants with his creation. Yes or no?
Correct. That I did say.
Except baby rape.
No, because the category of things that he wants to do does not include baby rape. How hard is that to understand?
Okay, so God can do whatever. So if he wants to do it, then he could do it, and that would be moral.
The morality is to use your term, a separate issue here. He has the ability to do anything that he wants.
But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, would it be moral? Like there are a lot of things I am capable of. A lot of things
because he would not want to do anything, and he would not do anything that is outside of his character.
Okay, so okay, here's the thing.
It's not anything he does is therefore good. It's his goodness is revealed in his actions.
But that doesn't get away from the problem, because it's not in my.
It's a Euthyphro dilemma.
It's not. It's a dilemma that is unique to the way you defined it, because you defined exactly like the way Kyle did. Because now, if baby rape is not in my nature either, if it was, it would still be immoral.
I wouldn't go that far. And I don't mean you individually. I want to state that for the record. I'm not calling you a baby raper. Okay. For fallen humanity, it is certainly well within the spectrum of our natures and desires. We know that because it happens. Unfortunately, it does happen.
It's not
in yours. Great. Okay. You in particular, but humanity as a category, specifically fallen humanity, that is infected head to toe, inside and out with sin. Everything we do in our flesh is marred by sin, and that that impact affects our mind. It affects
Yes.
our
Okay. But
affections,
okay. But
right?
you acknowledge there are certain things that are in some individuals' nature, but not in others. I'm not gay, so that's just not in my nature, right?
Well, I would say sexual immorality
Okay.
is
But
in your fallen nature.
okay. Yeah.
It
Yeah. But
does
not
not
being gay.
express in the same way as it
But
does for somebody else.
sure. Okay. But we're talking about specifically about being gay, not sexual immorality, just gay.
Nope, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
No, there are things that are sexually
Yeah.
immoral that isn't gay. I don't.
No,
And by the way, I'm not
I
saying being
agree.
gay is sexually immoral. But I don't
No, no,
think
no.
that.
Yeah, let's be
What I'm
clear.
saying
I'm
is,
saying that. So when you compare gay and
what is
sexually immoral, I'm saying 6 of one. You're
no, but
talking about category and particular
no.
at that point.
No.
So in the category
You would
of
say
sexual immorality, for example, we're straight guys.
right,
We are much more susceptible to straight sexual immorality than we are with any homosexual activity.
right, but
Agreed? Okay.
right. So, but what I'm saying, okay, but what I'm saying is, you wouldn't say that gay and sexual immorality are it's the same thing. You would say that gay falls under the umbrella of sexual immorality.
Right. Homosexuality falls under that umbrella. Is within that category.
Okay. So all right. So now being gay is in some people's nature. It's not in mine. Right?
I don't think it's the appropriate use of in nature, but I'll allow it.
Okay. All right. So okay. So what I'm saying is there are certain things that you would categorize as sin that are not in my nature, and but by my system, even if they were in my nature, it'd have no bearing on the morality of it. If you're saying that if something is in God's nature, then it's moral.
If it's in God's nature, it's
Then it's moral.
moral.
Yes.
I wouldn't define it in that way, but I would not disagree with it for the purposes of our discussion. And
Mhm.
terms have been difficult to nail down for the both of us, so that's why I said I won't argue that point, but I would say, for example, to use the previous example, and I don't expect you to repeat this because clearly your
Yeah.
daughter's around, but so we could have certain predilections to sexual immorality that are
Mhm.
of a certain nature. Others, it might be homosexuality. For others, it'll be baby raping, right? And so that's under the category of fallen nature, fleshly humanity, specifically sexual immorality, and then the various aspects of that. So it is within the nature of fallen humanity. Yes, it's not necessarily in your nature. Praise God that you don't have that particular issue, right? But just like for others, it's sexual immorality with animals,
Mhm.
right? Or, you know, um, murderers, right? People have brain trauma, right? And it affects their ability to tell right from wrong, to do the right thing, and or I may be off base on this. I don't think I am, but there's some who actually derive some sort of pleasure from it, even sexual pleasure, from the act of killing. And so y'all are adorable, by the way. Every time I see her pop in, we've been going a while. Do we need to push pause on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's she knows I'm about to leave, and so she's trying to suck up all this time with me. She's not.
Do it, brother. Don't let me keep you from it.
Yeah, but I'm gonna hold on. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Go in there. I'll be in there in a minute. Okay. Go in your room. I'll be here in a minute. I just want to I appreciate your. God, give me 1 second.
Okay. Take your time, brother.
NJ, hey, I'm gonna be out in like 2 minutes, okay? And we're gonna hang out, okay? Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's kind of like my alarm clock. She tells me when to get off the show. But I want to say, I'm glad we had this conversation.
For sure.
We kind of like help. I think we got some clarification, at least on where I'm coming from, and that's really why I kind of wanted this to go. I want to bring you back on when I come back.
To pick up right where we left off.
Yes, this is where
I've been waiting the whole 2 hours.
Okay.
But that's good. I agree. I think it's good to have that explanation, and to your credit, right? And it's sometimes it's more difficult to just be one-on-one than it is to have an extra voice or two on here. So kudos to you for being able to step up and open yourself up, take the criticism, and push back. I really appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on. I'll hit you up when I get back.
Absolutely.
Signing off, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all later. All right, we are.